아침 10시입니다. 새벽 6시에 깼어요. 원래 야간 끝나고 나주로 갈 때는 이틀을 쉬어야 되는데 하루만 쉬어가지고 일단 몸이 너무 뻐근해서 스트레칭을 최대한 하고, 그 다음에 팔굽혀펴기, 윗몸 일으키기 하도록 하겠습니다.
This firing now allows Berman to go to Capitol Hill and testify if he's called with all the information that he has. And mind you that all the unsealed indictments still can move forward. So just firing Berman does not stop a bad chain reaction that's set to come.
Daniel, Dale, what about you?
Well, I just think it's remarkable, Wolf, how little trust we can place in statements from the administration. I mean, we had the Attorney General telling us that someone had resigned, and then we had that individual tell us, no, he had not resigned. Then we had the Attorney General say the president had fired him. Then we had the president saying, no, I was not involved. And so it's just not a comedy of errors, but a comedy, tragic comedy of dishonesty, where there's just nothing you hear from this president or the people around him that you can just take at face value.
Is it a familiar story you're seeing unfold, Daniel? Because you cover it very closely.
Yeah. I mean, we hear the most trivial lies from the president. He lies about crowd sizes, about walks down ramps, but also, of course, about the serious stuff, about matters of life and death like the coronavirus, matters of justice like this one. So it's the big stuff, it's the small stuff. You just have to apply intense scrutiny and put a critical eye toward literally every statement you hear from this administration.
Yeah, we'll watch it very, very closely. Guys, excellent coverage. Thanks to all of you, Gloria Borger, Dana Bash, April, Ryan, Daniel, Dale, Sanjay. He's gone already, but of course, he is the best. To our viewers, thanks very much for watching. I'm Wolf Blitzer in Washington. I'll be back tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Eastern, for another special edition of the Situation Room. CNN's special coverage of President Trump's rally in Tulsa. Also, our special coverage of the firing of Jeffrey Berman, the U.S. Attorney, the former U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, and the coronavirus pandemic. Our special coverage continues right now with Boris Sanchez in the CNN newsroom. Thanks for watching.
Hello, and welcome to our viewers in the United States and all over the world. Thanks for joining us. I'm Boris Sanchez, and you're in the CNN newsroom. The scene tonight, President Trump addressing a much smaller than expected crowd of supporters at his rally in Tulsa, Oklahoma tonight. The president eager for a triumphant return to the campaign trail, instead facing a series of embarrassments. First, there was a standoff between the administration and a federal prosecutor who's been investigating members of Trump's inner circle. Attorney General Bill Barr's attempt to fire U.S. Attorney Jeffrey Berman backfiring. Barr claiming that Trump wanted him gone, only for Trump to later say, and I quote, "I was not involved." Then, just hours before the rally, 6 of President Trump's campaign staffers doing advance work on the event testing positive for coronavirus. And then, the crowd size at the rally. President Trump failing to fill the arena after bragging that 1 million people were trying to attend his rally. Entire sections had empty seats. Almost no one was in the overflow area. We haven't even mentioned some of the content of his speech. There is lots to get to this hour. Let's begin with Ryan Nobles. He's at the BOK Center. Ryan, a shocking headline. President Trump telling the crowd he wants to slow down on coronavirus testing in the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah, Boris, the president touched on a lot of topics here tonight. He made a little bit of news on many fronts. We'll get to that point you made about testing in a second, but we should also point out that tonight the president went after Vice President Joe Biden. He also accused the news media and protesters for depressing the crowd size here today. And he also even called for a 1-year prison sentence for Americans that are caught burning the American flag. But you're right, it is that suggestion that he made about testing, that testing is the reason that COVID numbers are spiking across the country. And the president even went to suggest that perhaps testing should be rolled back in the United States. Take a listen.
You know, testing is a double-edged sword. We've tested now 25 million people. It's probably 20 million people more than anybody else. Germany's done a lot. South Korea's done a lot. They called me, they said, the job you're doing, here's the bad part. When you do testing to that extent, you're gonna find more people, you're gonna find more cases. So I said to my people, slow the testing down, please.
Now, we should point out that the administration and a senior administration official telling our Jason Hoffman that the president was obviously joking when he said that there should rein in the number of tests of coronavirus across the country. And we should also point out that public health officials would argue against that point exactly, that the more you test, the more you are able to locate the virus, and that ultimately allows the number of cases to drop. And we have seen that across the world. Countries that increase their testing were able to locate it, contact trace it, and then ultimately reduce the number of cases. So a peculiar claim by the president, to say the very least, Boris, but there were many of those here tonight in Tulsa. Boris?
Yeah, no shortage of those, Ryan. Very notable that with 120,000 Americans dead because of coronavirus, the president is making jokes about testing during the pandemic. The president also addressed the fact that there were protesters outside his rally. What was his message about that?
Yeah, again, Boris, this is something that has us scratching our heads, frankly. You know, part of this is an expectations game, right? This was a very big crowd here tonight. I don't think anybody can deny that. If you've covered campaign rallies, you know it's difficult to bring as many people to an arena like this as the president did. But it's also worth noting that he expected a lot more people to show up. They said they didn't expect there to be an empty seat here in the BOK Center, roughly 20,000 people, and they also expected huge crowds outside the arena. The president himself saying as many as 40,000 people could jam the streets outside of the BOK Arena. There was nothing like that. They didn't fill this arena, and there were no one outside, and they ended up ending or canceling the program that was supposed to take place outside. And his campaign and the president himself is saying that it was because protesters prevented people from getting into the arena. Now, there were some protesters outside, there were scuffles, but they were very minor. And as far as we can tell, and we've reached out to police, we've had reporters spanned out outside the BOK Center all day today. It did not prevent any of the entrances into this arena from being closed for any significant amount of time. And it certainly did not prevent some 50,000 people from not getting into this arena and into the streets outside the arena as what the original expectations were. So again, of course, I want to emphasize, we're only going by what the campaign told us. They expected that many people to show up here tonight, and the simple fact of the matter is, it just did not happen. Boris?
Yeah, Ryan, the president blaming protesters and the media as well. Interesting that the president thinks that his supporters are listening to warnings from the media to stay away from gatherings like this, even though he is encouraging them. Ryan Nobles reporting from Tulsa. Thank you. Here now to discuss the president's rally, a star-studded panel. We have Chief Political Correspondent Dana Bash, Chief Political Analyst Gloria Borger, Political Correspondent Abby Phillip in Tulsa, and Dr. William Schaffner. He's a professor in the Division of Infectious Diseases at Vanderbilt University. Doctor, I have to start with you. This is remarkable. Again, the president says that he told his people to slow down testing. He says testing is a double-edged sword because it counts in cases where young people have the sniffles. Doctor, I am not an expert, but it seems like the worst thing to do during a pandemic is to scale back testing.
Well, Boris, I think it surprised and dismayed every doctor and every public health person who was listening this evening because they couldn't figure it out. As Ryan said, when you test more, you find more cases. Surely, the testing doesn't cause the cases. And the important thing is, when you find someone who's positive, you can provide them good medical care and you can do the contact tracing. And from a public health point of view, also, you get a better sense of where this virus is in your community. So for all those good reasons, testing is very important. You know, we test people for diabetes and for high blood pressure, so we can provide them good care and also find out how common this problem is in our communities, and that informs our public health policy. So for all those good reasons, testing is important.
Yeah, Gloria, to you, there was a lot of anticipation for this event, right? President Trump back on the campaign trail after 3 months off. This is amid multiple national crises. Again, more than 120,000 Americans dead because of coronavirus. No question, many of his supporters have friends and family that have been affected. And this was almost just like any other Trump rally. He spent a long time talking about himself. He attacked the media, the radical left. According to his campaign, he was joking about slowing down testing. The president is making jokes about the pandemic.
Well, it is as if he's back in 2016 and he's kind of clearing the deck. The pandemic is not the problem that it is, with 120,000 people and counting dead. That the questions about race relations in this country are not there, and that he's sort of, it's the same old, same old. And I think this is a president who could probably use a new act right now, because you cover the president, you know. This is the same act that we heard in 2016, and of course it worked really well in 2016. I think the question is whether it's going to work given where we are. This is a president who looks backwards. He looks to the 60s and the 70s, talking about law and order as if that's the way to handle race relations in this country right now. He jokes about COVID, uses racial epithets to talk about COVID as he did tonight. I think the moment in the country demands a seriousness of purpose. It doesn't demand a 20-minute riff on what he looked like walking down a ramp at West Point, or how he held his glass of water. And that's what he spent his time doing tonight.
Yeah, Abby, this rally was intended to kick off the 2020 campaign, to restart the president's 2020 campaign. But it raises the question, what exactly is his campaign message?
It really does, and I think in some ways this did not go as planned, not just because of what the crowd looked like, but also because of the message that came out of all of this. Earlier this afternoon, our own David Axelrod was saying that in some ways what has happened is that Trump has highlighted two of his greatest weaknesses. One is his inability to address the deep concerns of this country about racial divisions, as evidenced by the protests. And secondly, his handling of the coronavirus pandemic. This rally has epitomized the problem with the president not following his administration's own messaging on the greatest public health crisis this country has faced in many, many decades. The fact that there weren't that many people here at this rally seems to suggest that some of the president's own supporters believed that they didn't want to risk it. They didn't want to risk coming into this environment where they would be shoulder to shoulder with people. So instead of restarting his campaign on a message that is perhaps forward-looking, or on a message that is about his accomplishments or hopes for the country, it really highlighted a lot of things that are some of his greatest weaknesses right at this particular moment. And his attempts to attack Joe Biden, which there was a whole section of the speech where he riffed a lot of new lines, or tried out some lines on Biden, where he was reading from that speech. It seemed to kind of fall short because it was sort of a laundry list of items. The crowd didn't respond particularly well to them. And at a time when the country is really struggling right now and they're looking for leadership, attack lines are not sufficient. I think people, as Gloria said, are looking for the president to give them something that elevates him, that elevates himself. He is right now the president of the United States, and this is an opportunity to rise above it. I don't think necessarily that we saw.
여기까지만 하겠습니다. 일단
It's
씻어야
really
돼.
not been the day that
좀
Trump
샤워를 해야
sources
정신이
have told us
돌아올 것
that Trump
같습니다.
spent most of the day upset with tonight's event being overshadowed by news that 6 of his campaign staffers working on this rally tested positive for coronavirus.